Welcome into another live episode of Combat Center. We're just a couple days away from UFC on ABC 3. I am Alex Dono alongside Jonathan Ramlakan. And Johnny, they're giving us a good card from Long Island on free network TV this Saturday. Pump.
Yeah, they're giving us, like you said, man, it's going to be a great card they have. With these ABC cards, you see that they tend to load it up with kind of some sleeper fighters as well, with a couple of fights that are under the radar that's really going to help captivate the audience. And I think they're doing a really good job of loading this card up top to bottom with some good names that we'll talk about.
One thing before we jump into some of these fights, I keep in close tabs with our friends Lee and Jason from ParamountSports.com. They post their fight picks and their picks for all sports every week. And Lee went out of his way to tell me today they're actually taking the week off. They're not posting this card. They may post a couple of free selections, but they usually sell their picks. They're not selling any picks this week because there's just so many matchups that he says are too close to call, and he doesn't want to give his subscribers a losing week. So they're passing on this one. But listen, sometimes what's bad for the bet is good fan, because the reason why they're passing on this one is there are so many fights on this card that could go either way. And usually, John, when we break these down, we usually start with the main event and work our way down. But I actually want to start with one of the lower fights on the main card, and it's a big 6-fight main card. But Shane Burgos against Charles Jourdain, I think this one is going to be full of fireworks. Both of these guys are like human tornadoes. It's going to be a striking match. I especially, and I've got a soft spot always, and it's not because I hate Canadians, so that's not why I'm rooting against Jourdain, but I've got a soft spot for Shane Burgos because I love the way he attacks the body. I mean, this guy is just such a fluid boxer, and he definitely puts his chin in danger sometimes. He's willing to eat some shots, to dish some shots out. But Shane Burgos is a guy I always want to see this dude win, because he's just going to crack. He'll start his combinations to the body before he goes to the head. And I believe he is a small favorite in this fight. So if I were going to place some wagers, that's the guy I would wager on here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like you said, these guys don't have boring fights. I mean, if you look at the wins that Jourdain has gotten, I mean, his fight versus Andre Ewell was one of his best performances to date. Very exciting, top to bottom, from opening to close. He put on a masterclass. And if you look at Shane Burgos, even in his losses to Barboza and to Emmett, they have been absolute wars. And if just think about the knockout that he had, or the knockout that he took against Barboza, like he ate the shot. And then it was a very delayed reaction. It was something that we've never really seen before in terms of a delayed reaction from a head. Like, we've seen it from the liver, but we haven't seen that from the head. But he was going tit for tat with Edson Barboza before that came. And then in his last fight, he was able to kind of get everything back going against Billy Quarantillo and get another win, get back on those winning streaks. And now, like you said, he's a favorite in this fight. I think that's a well-deserved spot for him to be at. But this is going to be an uber competitive fight. I don't think we're going to see very many takedowns attempted, and I think it's going to be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, and you talk about the way that they stack these cards on ABC. Not only do they sometimes give you up and coming, not going to say under the radar guys, because you like to have some names, but guys who may not be ready to be pay-per-view main card type of guys. But the other thing I really think they look for, and this goes back to even the Fox days, right? Whenever UFC started to go on network TV, they try to stack the network TV cards with the most exciting fighters possible, right? Because it's basically an advertisement. Like when the UFC goes on ABC, it's basically a commercial for, hey, if you like what you see here, you got to buy our next pay-per-view. That's basically what it is. And that's why I remember one of the fights going back to the Fox days, like a decade ago, people, myself included, were so mad when they kept a Clay Guida versus Henderson fight off of Fox because they were only broadcasting the one fight, the Cain Velasquez Junior Dos Santos fights. Like, how do you keep that off Fox? Because at that time, Clay Guida he's like 100 years old. He's still going at it. But back then, that was like prime Clay Guida against prime Benson Henderson. So those are the types of fights they always should be, and keep putting on network TV. So this is going to be a great one. And, man, I think I'm going to go, and I've seen some people split on this one. I'm probably thinking that that Burgos is going to get maybe like a late third round stoppage. So there's going to be enough action until finally one guy's just going to go down. And I think Jourdain's going to be the one who goes down.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Charles Jourdain has gotten exponentially better. I mean, the losses that he's had have been really tough losses. I mean, losses against a guy like Julian Erosa and a guys against like Andre Feely, like those are skilled guys. But if you're looking to be at the top of the featherweight division, those are the guys that you have to be beating. So to see that those are the losses that Charles Jourdain take versus an Emmett or a Barbosa, and those are the losses that Burgos have taken. It shows that the level of the way that it has to take a loss. Burgos takes a little bit more before he takes that L. And Charles Jourdain, like I said, he's developed masterfully, and he can prove me very wrong this Saturday. But I'm gonna go ahead, and if I were to put some money on it, I would go with Shane Burgos as well.
I do want to jump up now to the main event. This is an interesting one with Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez, two very, very highly ranked guys. So, yeah, do you see the numbers there? Yair Rodriguez, number three, Brian Ortega, number two. So, I would wonder if the winner of this matchup earns a crack at the title against Volkanovski. I think the problem, like for Ortega, would be we saw that pretty recently, and it was pretty decisive for Volk, even though Ortega did come very close to a choke at one point in that fight. But it wasn't a close fight outside of that. So I guess if we're talking handing the title shot, I should probably be rooting for Yair Rodriguez in this spot, right? Because wouldn't he be a lot more likely to get it if he wins?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, Max Holloway has defeated and turned down all comers. So taking a loss to Max Holloway in this featherweight division is kind of like taking a loss to Habib in the lightweight division, right? It's really, really not going to knock your resume too much. So for Yair, the only thing with him is that he hasn't really fought too much as of recent, right? He's had the fight against Max, but before that, he's had a couple of fights falling out. The poke in the eye versus Jeremy Stevens caused that fight to be short. Like he hasn't had the amount of fights that we wanted to after his exciting knockouts a little bit earlier in his career. But this is a guy that's very exciting and he's very unique in the way that he strikes and the way that he does everything, right? He's also pretty good at submissions as well. So it would be an interesting matchup to see versus Volkanovski. I do think Volkanovski would handle him. I think he has like the power edge, and I think he would be able to control the just control the octagon, put Yair where he wants him to be, and make him uncomfortable. But I think Yair, if he gets a win, deserves a crack. But don't count out Brian Ortega getting another crack as well and earning a shot. I think if Brian Ortega shows a dominant victory, he can get another crack as well. Because if you look at the fights that Alexander Volkanovski has had, the two chokes, the guillotine and the triangle that Ortega has had, could arguably be the two most dangerous times in Volk's career in the UFC.
Yeah.
And you can argue that's the most danger he's been in as a champion as well. So I think if he is able to show a dominant performance tonight, he can as well earn that title shot for the featherweight title.
And I think Ortega is going to win this fight. I just think he's got so many weapons. I mean, T City, those chokes of his. I think it's going to be a war. I think this is going to be another one we're going to see a lot of action because Yair Rodriguez, really, really good puncher and kicker. But I think at some point, I'm going to go for probably a guillotine by Brian Ortega. This is a 5 round main event. So I think it's going to happen again. Go fourth round guillotine in favor of T City. And then hopefully, like you said, he can punch his ticket for another title shot because I'd like to see whoever comes out on top in this one. I think could very well be deserving of that crack because the only guy who's ranked in front of them is the aforementioned Max Holloway, who's already fought Volk like 100 times. So he's not going to jump in front of that line again. So the winner of this fight, yeah, it should be the next guy in line.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I don't want to pick the same thing two fights in a row for disparity, but I'm gonna go there, right? I'm gonna go ahead and take Brian Ortega as well. I think Yair has the creativity to put Brian in some weird situations, but I love the fundamentals that Brian Ortega has shown in his last couple of fights. Like ever since he took that time off and come back, I mean, the fight against TKZ and even the fight early against Volkanovski, he was having decent striking. Like he's did had some shots where he landed on the feet. So I think if Ortega is able to bring it all together, that he's going to be able to actually, like I said, defeat Yair Rodriguez and then do it handily. I think, like you said, a late stoppage. I think we see something, like you said, a little more unique than a guillotine. I think we do see something more like a triangle or something like maybe a rear naked choke where he gets Yair just too beat up, too much to handle, and he puts him in a bad position. Then he chokes him out. So I'd take him. I'm going to say rear naked choke. I think he gets him in a choke after putting on some good punches on him.
Got some good female fights on this card. Miesha Tate is back again. We'll see if she can get back to her winning ways after she won her first fight back. She stumbled in her second fight, which wasn't particularly entertaining. She's taken on Lauren Murphy. Miesha Tate's around a -200 favorite in this one. That's pretty hefty. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit hesitant to take that action after her performance against Ketlin Vieira, which brought her down to earth a little bit. But this is Miesha Tate. She's a perfect booking though for Fox because she's not maybe an immediate contender right now, but she's a name that everybody knows. She's about as close to a household name as you can get outside of like the top two or three female fighters of the last few years. So I think this is a really good booking for Fox. What do you think happens in this fight against Lauren Murphy? Because I think Miesha probably wins it. I'm going to say by decision, but I don't know if I'm convinced enough to take her at like -205 or 210, anything like that.
Yeah, like you said, it's tough to put her at like minus 210, 205 because I mean, Lauren Murphy essentially just fought for the title, right? She was
Yeah.
just up there. She's ranked number 3 right now. So it's hard to kind of say that this is a great spot for her as far as, maybe this is competitively the best spot for her. But as far as coming back in and trying to make a direct impact and having somebody like Valentina Shevchenko say your name, saying, hey, this is somebody that I potentially want to fight. This is a perfect situation for Miesha Tate. I think she's going to be able to get into this fight. I mean, she's going to be able to, in my opinion, take Lauren Murphy down. There's going to be some spots where Lauren is scrappy and she's going to be able to do some damage and do some stuff like that. But I think this is a fight where we see Miesha Tate take her down and do a little bit of controlling. I mean, if you look at her last couple of fights, she's averaged about 2 takedowns in her last 4-ish fights. So I can see her doing that and edging, like you said, a decision victory. And she puts herself back in that top 5 in that ranking.
So something actually really interesting on the prelims. We were talking about this before we went on. Like I forgot he was even on this card. Jack Shore, who's a phenomenon, 16-0 overall. I think he's 4-0 in the UFC, if I'm not mistaken. He's taking on Ricky Simon before well, it's going to be on ESPN. So it's a pretty big showcase, but he's not even going to be on the ABC portion of this card. This has been a really fun guy to watch. I have won some money on Jack Shore in some of his recent fights. So, it goes to show you how good and deep that this card is, that a guy like that couldn't even crack 6-fight main card.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, just taking a look at some of the wins that he's gotten recently, right? I think he's 5-0. Yeah, 5-0 in the UFC. One,
Yeah,
two,
wow.
three, four, five, five, and this is going to be a sixth fight in the UFC. Quite a few canceled bouts. I mean, one against Umar Nurmagomedov, once against Saeed Nurmagomedov. But every fight that he's had, I mean, going back to Cage Warriors, rear naked choke, rear naked choke, rear naked choke, and then he's had a couple of decisions. So now he's going up against some more of those talented fighters, but in those decisions, they have been dominant fights. This is where he's showing like, hey, whether it's a finish early in the fight or whether it's controlling someone for 15 minutes, I can do both. And Jack Shore, like as he said, 16-0. This guy is an underrated, under-talked about threat. He's almost like a Shavkat Rakhmonov of the division because nobody talks about him quite as much as they do maybe the Hamzat Chimaev or in this division, other guys that are rising quite as fast. So I think Jack Shore is going to do really, really good. I think he's a sleeper in the 135-pound division. Look for him to compete for a title maybe by the end of next year or 2 years from now.
I want to send a message to Dana White. I want to send a message to every decision maker in the UFC. Can you please free the Diaz brothers? I just want to watch these guys fight, okay? So Nick Diaz has been public this past week about wanting to be released from the UFC. I mean, honestly, like I love Nick. I love Nick more than he is my favorite fighter of all time. I admit at this point in his career, based on the way that he performed against Robbie Lawler, Nick Diaz probably is not truly UFC level right now, but he's got a name, he's got a fan base. People, thank you. Thank you so much, Ramus. People want to watch Nick Diaz fight. I want to see him at this point in his career maybe do some like mixed rules, boxing type fights, do some freak show type of stuff. Now, I guess, understand why the UFC would be or should be more hesitant to let Nate go. But the thing about Nate is, I should even say, he wants to release. He doesn't want Nick wants to be released. Nate just wants to fight. He wants to fight out his contract. He's got one fight left on his deal, and then he's made it very public he wants to leave the UFC after that, but they can't let him go until he fights that last fight. They keep procrastinating. Like they just don't. And I think they're doing it on purpose because, hey, if we let this guy leave, he's going to go somewhere else and compete against us and bring in big time numbers. The UFC side of the story, though, Jonathan, is I guess that they want to fight Nate against Conor McGregor, but Conor McGregor's timeline is challenging, right? Because he's got all the money in the world and he's jet setting and doing God knows what. So they obviously, if they want to do Nate versus Conor, they can't let Nate fight in the meantime because then he bolts, then he finishes his contract. So they're waiting out this Conor McGregor timeline. Nate Diaz does not want to be, stuck in quicksand waiting for McGregor to make up his mind. So he just wants to fight and he wants to leave. And then at a certain point, you have to ask yourselves, if you're Dana White, you have to ask yourself, like, at what point is it just too much that we're keeping this guy from making a living because we're just at the whim of Conor McGregor and we're not going to let him fight until Conor's ready? Like, enough is enough. Just let the man fight and go on his way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, you can't keep him waiting and keep him sidelined for that long. If you want to, let him fight that one fight out before you release him on the contract, okay, get him that fight. If you want to feed him to Hamzat Chimaev, feed him to Hamzat Chimaev. Let him go out in a put him in the worst possible situation that you want to and let him go out, right? Don't just hold him there. Don't just have him sitting doing absolutely nothing, becoming stale, aging as a fighter now, right? This
Yeah.
is not something you want to be doing as a combat sports athlete. So I think it's in the best interest of both people just to get a fight as soon as possible. It's going to sell. Nate Diaz sells regardless. Even if this is his last UFC fight. Dana, you don't think that's going to sell? Like everybody's going to want to see Diaz's last UFC fight. That's going to be something you can sell without a title fight on the card as well. So I think you do this fight. I think you have to find him an opponent. Like you said, the Conor timeline just does not match up. Connor's not even that good anymore, to be honest. So it's like, get the trilogy anyways, but you can probably find him a better matchup anyways. I think him and Tony Ferguson would be a fun matchup. Maybe you saw a revamped version of Tony before he got starched. Maybe that's kind of a fun
Yeah.
matchup you could put together at 170. Or, there's a bunch of other guys that are kind of coming down. Like we've talked about last week, there's a fresh influx of talent in this 155-pound division. Let one of those guys go up, fight Nate, call it a day for their career.
Yeah, and even Tony Ferguson, I think that'd be a perfect fight because these guys are similar enough in build and in styles that they would deliver, and in personality they're similar enough because they're both weirdos. And Ferguson, when Nate Diaz he was on the MMA Hour this week, they did an emergency episode for him, and it's probably got like 1 million views at this point. He even said like it's not like he hasn't been asking for fights. He has been asking for fights. He specifically named Vicente Luque and Tony Ferguson as guys he's asked the UFC for. He said there was like 8 other guys, but he's got the Diaz brother memory. He smoked it away. He couldn't remember the other names off the top of his head. But I think a Tony Ferguson fight would be perfect. I really think that's something that they should have already been considering putting together. So listen, I had an awesome time talking to you, sir, as always, and I encourage everyone smash the like button. Make sure you subscribe. If you're watching us right now on the 5 Reasons Sports channel, make sure you also subscribe on the dedicated Combat Center YouTube channel. Jonathan does a lot of extra content. He's our lead MMA reporter. This guy's all over the place on that. So make sure you subscribe, and we will talk to you again after the fights on another episode of Combat